Now, countries across continents are beginning to chart out a path to ease restrictions as this spread of the deadly coronavirus has started to decrease all across the world. In China, biggest cities Shanghai and Beijing, thousands of students returned to school after spending close to 3 months at home under nationwide lockdown measures. China has majorly curbed the spread of virus and is still under high alert to avoid a second wave of infections. For more details on this story, joining us live is WION correspondent Patrick Falk, and he joins us from Beijing. Patrick, thanks for joining us on WION on this big story. You know, it's great signs for the entire world. When the epicenter of this virus, that is China, has started reopening schools, it's great to see children returning to schools in Beijing and Shanghai, the biggest cities in China. But there are still restrictions in place. Could you just give us the details?
Yeah, well, that's right. Great signs for students and parents as well, no doubt. Schools in Beijing and Shanghai, to some extent, have reopened today. In Beijing, in particular, high school students, senior high school students, I should say, have been allowed back today. Senior middle school students won't be allowed back till next week, but certainly being seen as a step in the right direction. As you say, these students have been out for several weeks, several months, in fact, since the Lunar New Year holidays. In fact, they went up on holiday, came back and never went back to school. So it's caused a huge amount of disruption, as you can imagine. But, you know, schools are still really taking all sorts of precautions. So people are having their temperatures checked when they arrive in classrooms. They're wearing face masks, wearing gloves and practicing a bit of distancing between one another. So they are still trying to maintain precautions, but there has been a lot of pressure to get the schools reopened, particularly for students that are going to be taking exams to move on to the next phase of their education, if you like.
Absolutely. Patrick, we're also learning that you mentioned that only students of a few classes are allowed back in school as of now. Not all students have been allowed to go back to schools at one go. And everything is certainly not back to normal as far as even schools are concerned. Reports suggest that China's Ministry of Education has laid down certain guidelines like that you were mentioning. Guidelines include students must have their temperatures checked at the school gates, and they must also show some green health codes on an app that calculates a person's infection risk. So the Education Ministry is taking a lot of precautions as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this Green Health app is something that everybody in Beijing certainly is carrying around with them, and you need it to go into different parts of the cities, into different districts, and really it's your sort of passport, if you like, to move around the capital. And there is a sense that there is an extra bit of effort that's being made to protect Beijing. As a matter of fact, up until 2 weeks ago, Beijing, along with Hubei, were the only two places left in China where they hadn't announced when schools would open exactly. And notably, authorities just over the weekend have announced they're going to be clamping down on what they've described as uncivilized behavior. So people are going to be fined if they cough in public without covering their mouths. We're also being told that fines for things like spitting and littering are going to be quadrupled by 4 times. So any matters related to public health are being taken very seriously, and that includes in the school as well.
Absolutely. Patrick, one final question. The China officially says that officially the number of infected people in China stand at just over 82,000. Officially, China's death toll is just over 4,600. And many European countries have casted doubts over these figures as far as China is concerned, including US President Donald Trump and Macron as well. So what is the situation in China at the moment? Are they fearing a second wave of infections? Are they preparing for it?
Well, I'd say generally the feeling in China certainly is that we're seeing the back of the virus and the numbers are dwindling. Notably, yesterday, the National Health Commission made the announcement that there were 0 new infections in Wuhan. Now, that bit of data or that new development is no doubt going to be scrutinized very carefully by people all around the world. But it is nevertheless, if accurate, a remarkable achievement when you consider that Wuhan accounted for more than 50% of all cases of infections across the country and more than 80% of the deaths in the country. It's certainly, China's by no means out of the woods just yet. There is still a bit of an outbreak that the country is battling in the north of the country in Heilongjiang province, which borders with Russia. But the step that's taken place with Wuhan is a big step. People are cheering about it. It's good news in general. And I think the general sense is that even if the figures aren't correct, I think it probably is accurate to say that China is fighting off the coronavirus. And certainly people are feeling a lot more relaxed, getting about their business as usual. And you're certainly seeing a lot more people out on the streets in Beijing than there were a couple of weeks ago.
Patrick, for getting us all the latest updates live from Beijing. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us with all the latest updates. Certainly a great sign for the world when students have started returning to schools.